You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Okay, well, y'all know I love experimenting with some different things, and for this episode, I am so excited. One of my favorite podcasts is agreed to come in and recreate one of their episodes. So, Bryan and Dave White from Bring Me the Axe, thank you all so much for coming here.
Hey, thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I was so excited you said yes to do this because, and I guess we should clear this up right out of the way. Bring Me the Axe. This is from Mommy Dearest, right?
Yeah. This was we when we started we were called something else. We were called the Brothers Grimm, which turned out to
Uh-huh.
be a really bad name for a podcast since there's like 10,000 Brothers Grimm podcasts.
People
And
wanted you to talking about something you didn't want to talk about.
but Dave had been sitting on this domain for like years and hadn't really done anything with it. And I was like, okay, like if we were a few episodes in, I was like, if we're gonna change our name, like now is probably the time. So we switched it over to that. I love it. It makes it's fun. It's good. It's thematically apropos.
Well, that's kind of the point. So in within Mommy Dearest, Bring Me the Axe is a line that is either hated or revered depending on the crowd you hang out with. As one of these like kind of really standout moments in the movie, right? Where Joan Crawford is acting the hell out of that role.
Oh yeah. It's like I think if you're everybody no wire hangers is the go-to, but like this is the sort of the other one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is a movie that is rich with beautiful lines.
Don't
It's
fuck
true.
with me, fellas.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, she reminds well, there's a scene in that TV show Schitt's Creek where I don't know if y'all ever watched that, but where
Oh
the
yeah.
mom goes back into her acting career and it has a very similar vibe to it.
Yep.
I think
There's
she's in like Crows 3 or something.
the crowing.
Croning, yeah.
The crows
But
have
this is
eyes.
this is my favorite thing about Bring Me the Axe, though. I think why I like it so much and why, it's something that's on my kind of regular listen list here is because y'all celebrate some pretty obscure films, or you celebrate kind of some of the funnier and sort of like what the fuck side of horror movies and a lot of, kind of underappreciated films. And you bring in a sense of humor when you do it. So I think as I got to know the show, Bring Me the Axe was a great name, not only because it's obviously kind of horror related, but then obviously but then also the tone kind of just felt right as I got to know y'all as your personalities more.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because these are like conversations that Dave and I have been having for like years, just like texting back and forth. Like a lot of some of the movies that we came to like to eventually cover were usually like Dave would text me in the middle of the night and be like, I am watching blah blah blah. You've got to see this. Like
The
what was it? That
Howling.
was oh, the Howl. I mean, the Howl. I go back a million years of the Howling, but I'm trying to think of. There was one in particular. It wasn't Don't Panic. Ooh, I can't remember now. Now I'm drawing a
It
blank
probably was Don't
What's
Panic.
your
because it was. Or maybe it was Don't Panic because it was. I was watching. I was watching Death Stalker, and it ended a little early because that movie's like 70 minutes long, and I got to the end and I was like, well, shit. Like I've got some time before I'm like fall asleep here. What else should I watch? And you're like, listen, I am watching. Oh, it was X-Ray. It was when we did
Mhm.
X-Ray. You were
Okay.
like, oh my God, you've got to see this movie. And I put it on immediately because it was on Tubi. And I could not
uh-huh.
believe what I was seeing. Like it is one of the strangest movies. Um, like if you're not familiar with it, it's a slasher movie that was, well, in theory, it's a slasher movie that was produced by Canon in
Uh-huh.
that sort of period where everybody was trying to figure out like trying to make their own slasher movie. But like those
Uh-huh.
guys, Golan and Globus, have a very shaky grasp on like what constitutes a film to begin with, and so theirs is just even stranger and more alien. But it's a truly amazing movie. Like I enjoy it tremendously. It's it's a baffling film.
Yeah, it's basically what would a movie look like if it was written and directed by people who had never seen people before?
Or somebody just
Well,
described to them like what a
Yeah,
movie is.
you know, it's funny. There's a recent, let's see, I guess an August release from Vinegar Syndrome called Devil Times Five.
not
Oh
just
yeah, I
last
just watched that recently.
Isn't that it? Kind of is the same vibe, right? You're like, this is not how humans talk.
that is a deeply unsettling movie because I had seen it probably I don't know 10 or more years ago, probably more than that, maybe
Yeah.
15 years ago, and
Uh,
I don't remember. I didn't think much of it at the time, and I watched it again last night because I was sort of burning through all the stuff I have piling up, and
uh,
there are moments that are so unsettling in that. Like it occurred to me that the Leif Garrett character, who is a like a 12-year-old boy, is
uh-huh.
essentially trying to seduce an adult man in the weirdest
uh,
way for
not
reasons
just
that are unclear.
not just any adult man, but the guy who played Boss Hogg on the Dukes of
Yeah,
Hazzard.
and
It's
I was like, what the fuck?
yeah, when that movie ended, I came out the other side of it and I was like, it reminded me a lot of The Baby,
Mhm.
um, which is a movie that we did. That's one of my and it's stunning to many people, but The Baby is one of my favorite movies. And it is very similarly like off-putting and troubling and strange. And so when I came out the other side of Devil Times Five, I was like, oh my God, that is so similar in like tone and approach and vibe. Like all of the angles are very strange. It has this quality about it that seems like it's made for TV, but
Yeah.
it's also a very violent movie. So and there's tons of nudity in it. So
Right.
but like I can't quite reconcile the two approaches to the way the movie is made, but I was really, really satisfied with that one. I was glad I ordered that one.
Same. No, same. It's I'm a subscriber anyway, so you know, I just kind of test it out, but holy cow. Yeah, that was a wonderful surprise. Um, so okay, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like this love for obscure movies, the love for finding that kind of something funny, something different, something unique in movies and celebrating it. Your love for film, obviously, well, I should say the podcast goes back to about February of last year, but I'm sure your love for film goes back, you know, obviously years before that. Can you just spend like, I don't know, 90 seconds or a few minutes, just kind of, you know, what's that progression? Did y'all start watching Disney films and then realized that you like Ursula more, so then got onto weirder stuff? Like, you know, kind of did you start with Friday the 13th? Like what's that kind of journey for y'all to get to where you are today in your love for movies?
Well, I the story that I usually tell is like I was always like I was a very frightened little kid, like when I was very, very small, very young. But something about like roller coasters and loud music and like spooky, scary stuff was always very appealing to me. And so
Okay.
when I was like 5, my dad took me to see The Empire Strikes Back at a movie theater in New York. And this was at a theater that was also showing Friday the 13th at the same time. And so we go
Okay.
in and that poster is on the wall. And like I'd seen Empire Strikes Back already and I was like, you know, appropriately obsessed with Star Wars when I was that age, but like I could not take my eyes off of that poster.
Okay.
It was just, you know, it's a very evocative, you know, image to begin with, you know, like
Mm.
so where most people, children especially, were probably very put off by it. Like I couldn't take my eyes off of it. So eventually, like the family kind of picks up stakes and we moved to Massachusetts, and there is a local TV show and on Saturday afternoons after cartoons are over called Creature Double Feature. Um, that
Great name.
yeah, it was awesome. Like there was no host or anything like that, so it wasn't like Zachary or Elvira or anything. It was just two movies and an announcer, but it was all schlocky AIP stuff. And so like lots of Vincent Price and a lot of like off-brand kaiju movies, but they also played a lot of Godzilla stuff. So it was sort of like this kind of like Saturday morning sugary cereals and like goofy campy horror movies that like as soon as I discovered this I was immediately hooked. And it just kind of, it just kind of escalates from there. Like eventually I get old enough, like we get, the family gets a VCR, and we get sort of unsupervised video rental access, and like from there it was just like stacking them up and knock them down, all the hits, the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street. And like eventually you get to a point where like you've seen all of that stuff and you've hit all of the name brands, but there's still like dozens upon dozens of videos in that like horror section and action movie section that all are like you've been avoiding them because they don't have a recognizable face. There's no named killer in them. That's just everything looks kind of vaguely European. And eventually you get to that, and that's where like all of a sudden it was like diving headfirst into a world of just like imagination and wonder. But it's all, of course, it's just super crappy. But it's hard not to fall in love with a lot of it.
That's awesome. Dave, is this a similar story for you?
I mean, yeah, so we have one other sibling who was between us, and so I was the youngest, and I am the youngest. And as such, I think my opinion probably never really mattered when it came to this stuff. So I was sort of subjected to whatever everybody else wanted to watch, which in this case was usually kind of spooky stuff. And we should also say that like our father is a big cinephile. I mean, he has a deep love of movies. I think if he's instilled anything in us, it's probably that. So I think that we both have appreciation for a lot of older stuff that maybe younger audiences are not as interested in anymore.
Okay.
But we were able to follow a lot of the threads from these earlier AIP movies and like even before that, Universal stuff, and follow that
Right.
through into the 80s, because obviously there is sort of a connection in all of these movies. So, but it's I was just sort of there soaking it all up as well. So here we are today.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
like we do both have sort of like a common sort of personality characteristic that is sort of like a weird need to kind of like research and catalog everything, which is like a lot of what we do is sort of we're kind of like checking off boxes on lists.
Uh-huh.
So
I
like
think that's pretty common for if you look at like any horror community or genre film fans. There's a sort of collector mentality that appeals to people, and a lot of it really is about like gotta catch them all.
got to catch them all.
I joke, I've joked before with people that the autistic people kind of find each other in the world of genre cinema, and we all kind of celebrate this stuff together. Because, yeah, like I get unsettled if there's a list that I'm like, there's one title that I can't track down, and it just becomes kind of an obsession.
Oh yeah, I
So,
did that last year where I was like, you know what? There's a lot of Jallo that I haven't seen, and I'm like this is the year I'm gonna fill in those blanks. Like, and I'd seen all of the hits and stuff like that, but there's a lot of like minor league titles that I'd never
okay.
seen, and so I like made a list and I started going down it. And when I couldn't find them streaming, even on like the weird sort of kind of shady corners of the internet, like I started start to panic until I started to read the reviews of them, and I'm like, okay, maybe most of these are forgotten for a very good reason.
And then wouldn't you know, they're all on Tubi.
all on Tubi. Vinegar Syndrome and Severin are releasing a lot of them.
I just had to look them.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. No, that's true. Even though, and we'll jump into it here in just a second, but even I was going through all the films of Jodorowsky, and there was one he made, and I'm gonna forget the name here in just a second. Oh, Tusk, called Tusk. And I looked for about 2 weeks, I would say every day, and I found one copy that was a someone had filmed a copy on French TV with no English subtitles, obviously. And I was like, all right, this is what I'm gonna watch it then. So it was like
Oh
a
yeah.
steady cam in front of a TV in French, but I
Uh,
can technically say I've seen the movie.
I guarantee you, like if you were to find like a subtitled version of it, you'd come out the other side of it and be like, I still don't know what this movie is about.
Yes,
Like I did
that's
that. We had a bootleg of Tetsuo the Iron Man when I was a
okay.
teenager, but it was unsubtitled. It had no subs, and so I was like, one of these days, man, I'm going to track it down. And then eventually, it did come out on U.S. video with subtitles, and I watched it, and I was like, I still don't know what this movie is about.
I'm more confused with the
Yeah.
subtitles. That's funny. Well, before we jump into the movie we're going to talk about today, so maybe just one more question or two on Bring Me the Axe, because kind of fast forward then, so y'all kind of develop that love for cinema, and then you're sitting there and you realize that you want to make a podcast built around Amityville 2, or
Oh
what was
yeah.
that kind of conversation that just took you from love of movies to then, becoming a personality that is an expert in them?
Around 2007, I wrote a blog called Cinema Suicide that
Mhm.
was kind of a minor league name in that world. Uh, and eventually I just closed it down. Like I just nobody was reading blogs anymore. Everything was moving over to YouTube, and I didn't really. I made an attempt to pull that off, but being a one man show was really really hard. So I just kind of let it die. And then a few years ago, I had this. I started up a Substack where I was going to bring it back
Okay.
and do Cinema Suicide over again. And so I was like, all right, well, it's kind of hard to get eyes on this. There's a lot of noise. Substacks are people like those, and but it's hard to get eyes on it. So I was trying to think of other ways to promote it, and they had a podcasting tool that you could use. And so I was like, all right, I wonder if Dave would be into this. And at the same time, I was watching one of those like In Search of Darkness documentaries, and they were like they talked about it was one of those episodes where they were kind of toward the end of it. They'd done a few of them and they were kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. And they brought up Amityville 2, and I was like, that's a really weird movie. So like maybe I'll watch that. And I put it on and I
Uh-huh.
was like, okay, that's the movie that we're gonna launch a podcast with. So I was like, how Dave, if would you want to do a podcast? And he's like, what do I gotta do? And I was like, just watch a movie and we'll talk about it for like an hour. And that's kind of how it was. It was supposed to be a vehicle to promote the Substack, and then the podcast project eventually just eclipsed all of that. I can't remember the last time I actually wrote in the Substack, but that's what launched the ship really.
That's awesome. And then just to call out a couple of highlights for me from like early on, y'all's, your humor and your kind of insight and the way you kind of banter and talk about these films. The Old Dark House is a fantastic episode. Obviously, Vamp. And then you cover Sleepaway Camp, which is just, I always love hearing different takes on Sleepaway Camp. And then going on,
That yeah, that's a favorite of mine, that episode.
it's so great. And then you were talking about the baby. These are all in 2023. And then, I mean, I could go on. I mean, you have a Halloween episode and Friday the
Mhm.
13th episode, but the first one, I'm just scrolling up because the first one this year was 2024, was Bronx 1990 Bronx Warriors, and
Oh, right, yeah, because this year, beginning in 2024, we started because what we were doing was we were a biweekly show last year, and then we started getting a little carried away with like bonus episodes, and like we would be like, oh, we've got a friend that we want to bring on, and so all of a sudden we just throw another episode into it. So
okay,
eventually it was like, well, why don't we just go weekly? But Dave had an idea where it was like, what if we did like stuff? What if we did something that was like, it was essentially, if you listen to 99 Cent Rental, which is the name of the other show, it's functionally the same podcast, but thematically it's different. That stuff's sort of like where Bring Me the Axe is all horror. 99 Cent Rental is kind of like not otherwise specified. It was like if you went to the video store on a Friday night and you rented, anything, it'd be like a kickboxing movie or a Mad Max ripoff or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That's what 99 Cent ripoff, 99 Cent Rental is.
Same thing.
It's a 99 Cent ripoff of Bring Me the Axe. But yeah, that's what that podcast is it's so yeah, we launched with two episodes. We did 1990 Bronx Warriors, and we also did a really, really strange sex comedy called Delivery Boys,
Yikes.
which is a fucking crazy movie. It's
I think those were both my ideas, and that
yeah, yeah.
one was
Well,
a good one.
Bronx Warriors is a great episode on a great movie. Uh, I do like the Delivery Boys episode quite a bit because it's us really struggling really struggling with it, but at the same time the story behind it is very strange because it was a movie it's a vanity project that was created by the man who was the namesake for Mattel's Ken doll.
And it's a dark story.
It's
I
a
don't think either one of us expected it to be quite so dark. And as soon as we got into it, we're like, oh shit.
it's yeah, yeah.
Well, I had a little bit of a similar experience when I first discovered Mondo Macabro. So, you talk about the completionist brain. Naturally, I wanted to go find their first title and wound up on their first Blu-ray, which was The Fan. And I was like, oh, cool, the label that put out Lady Terminator. Wow.
Yeah.
uh, I like The
Yeah.
Fan now, but that was not what I was expecting.
No, no, no. Our first Bring Me the X episode for this year was actually New Year's Evil. Was
Oh,
Oh,
you're right. I'm sorry, I got the dates wrong. You're right. Those
yeah,
were on New Year's Eve versus. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
yeah. Which that movie's also very funny.
Awesome. Well, I hope people go check it out if they aren't already.
Mhm.
What do you have a preferred platform to send people to in terms of rating and liking and subscribing and all that stuff?
Uh, I typically send everybody to Spotify just because it's kind of cross-platform. I think Apple Podcasts only just recently became cross-platform, but I just usually link everybody to Spotify.
Okay, wonderful. Well, a movie that I think could fit in well to your podcast, which I appreciate you talking about here, is a 1985 movie, which is an anthology horror film that was released by Vinegar Syndrome early in their Blu-ray life. This was title 17 for them, and it's called Night Train to Terror.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so thank you, first of all, because you recommended this.
Yeah, this was my pick. This was my
Listen,
pick.
if someone ever, if I was invited, if I was inviting someone and I said, what movie do you want to watch? And they were like, hey, let's watch Night Train to Terror. I would smack them in the mouth if they made me watch this movie.
It's
Do
it
Now
is
I
a
know how every one of our guests feels when I'm like, you should watch X-Ray with us.
oh
They're like
man.
extra, and you're like, no, 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 not extra.
Yeah, no, this good God, this movie. Yeah, because it was when we were arranging this. We were just emailing back and forth, and you were like, if there's anything you want to talk about. And Paul Yelovich was on Instagram talking about this movie, and I was like, oh, that's right. This because he posted like the everybody's got something to do video, and I'm like, all right, that's right. This because this movie is amusing to me. However, I freely admit that it is a baffling affair from start to finish. It has a really strange production story to it, but the
Yeah.
movie itself is nearly unwatchable.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you know the production story because I dug into it a little bit as well. So we can talk about it just a second. But in structure, it's an anthology horror film, right? And
Theoretically, yeah.
it's an attempt at an anthology horror film that has three parts, and then of which all three parts are separately full-length horror films. Or
Yeah, yeah. So,
right?
so yeah, at the time of the movie's production in like 83 or 84, I believe there were there's three movies. There's one called Scream Your Head Off, which is the first segment.
Hmm.
That movie, I believe, is unfinished. It's just bits
Okay.
and pieces of a movie that never fully came to be, which makes a lot of sense when you watch it because it is of the three segments, it is the one that makes the least amount of sense.
Right.
The second one is something called
Isn't
Death
it just
Wish.
called Greta?
It's called, well, that's one of the alternative titles. I think the real title
Okay.
is Death Wish Club, and that's an
Okay.
actual finished feature film by a guy named John Carr, who also directed the first one. And he's a guy who's like
On the
tied up.
Blu, you get the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray.
Oh, that's right.
That's
If you get
the
it on
full movie.
you get the full movie. And then the last one is called Cataclysm. And I believe that one is also a finished movie.
Yeah, Cataclysm does exist, I'm pretty sure as well.
Yeah, because
Um,
I found IMDb pages for that one and for Death Wish Club, but the first one is like I don't think it was ever actually released in any sort of form other than in this one. But there is a movie that came out in 1992 by Carr and written by this movie's writer called Marilyn Alive and Behind Bars that sounds very similar to what's in this movie, and it makes me think that eventually they were like they shot some other footage and just inserted it into Scream Your Head Off and like made a full movie out of it just eventually and like 10 years later.
that would make a lot of sense. I want to get into like the content here in just a second, but just to finish setting up the structure because it's kind of funny. So, to piece this, because there's always this thing in an anthology film, well, a lot of times, where
Always got to
people will
wrap
try.
around.
Yeah, exactly. And so for this one, it's an ongoing conversation between God and Satan, who are on a train that everybody knows is heading towards an accident.
Yep.
And there's a I guess they hired a band who's on this train to kind of celebrate, and the final segment is figuring out what happens to this band in the afterlife. But they're setting it up as a seventh seal, if you will, type level of depth of conversation about the afterlife.
Yeah, it's like the Seventh Seal if the people who were writing it had head trauma.
It's definitely it's great value Bergman for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the dance of
we
death
have
is real goofy.
we have Bergman at home.
Yeah, because it's not just it's there's so it the wraparound stuff ostensibly takes place on a train, and like there's this band who
Listen, can we stop using the term band because it's not right? It's not the right word. I don't know what is the right word, but it's not.
But like I can't remember if it's in the second one or the third one where they're like, "Boy, what a bummer that our van broke down. Good thing this train was here to pick us up from the top, boys." And then they play that song. They play this song again, which the whole setup is like it starts out at midnight, and at dawn, this train is destined to crash, which implies that from start to crash, this band has been playing this song over and over and over for hours.
And it's no better at the end than it is at the beginning.
Well, there's like 3 verses and a chorus.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. It's oh boy. But the thing is I love the song. It's so funny.
It's an earworm. It's super catchy.
And there's a nice little breakdancing break in the middle of it.
Slow motion.
Yeah, you can tell that that's what this guy's really into, breakdancing. He's the singer, quote unquote. But you can tell dancing is his true passion.
Oh yeah, he is a competent b-boy.
Mm-hmm.
More so than Ray Gun, anyways. It's a better performance.
Now there were shades of Ray Gun, and I appreciated
it. This was proto Ray Gun.
Yeah. It's like she watched this movie and was like, you know what? I think I can pull that off at the Olympics,
but better and slower.
Yeah, it's but it's that's the thing that I always remember is, first of all, I remember that I am completely confused throughout the 3 actual movie segments of this, and I'm thoroughly entertained by the sort of interstitial wraparound stuff.
Yeah.
This is like weird, like sexual tension between God and Satan too.
Yeah.
No, that's true. And he called him his son at one point, which, not that I care, but biblically inaccurate. So they're creating a new mythology.
Yep. Yeah. He's I mean, I suppose that's true in a sense. Lucifer being a fallen angel and all that, creation
in the broader
of God.
sense, sure.
Yeah. But you would think, like, what is he, like Jesus's brother?
Which introduces a really fascinating movie that
if this movie is to be believed, I certainly hope not.
Oh God, I know it's like a movie made by the Process Church.
If we're sticking with the theme of comparing this to classic cinema, I guess in fairness to the musical group, whatever we decide to call them, if Titanic taught us anything, it's that the band plays as a ship's going down, right? So
this is true.
I guess a loose homage to Titanic in here too.
Yeah.
So, all right. God and Satan arguing, and each segment they set up by saying, well, check this out. And and then they get
because the argument, it's this really kind of tepid philosophical argument where it's like mankind is doomed, and God's like, well, I don't think so. And then he's like, well, what do you think of this? And then they watch a movie where like people do terrible things, and God is like,
And you're like,
God, I'm gonna let him into heaven anyways.
What'd you say, Dave?
This is making a reference to Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
So jumping right into the first one, because the first one, if I remember correctly, is the only one that doesn't use stop motion. So I want to get that into that in just a second, because it was kind of fun surprise. But the first one is a pretty straightforward tale about pretty shitty people that there's no real understanding of what's going on, but there's something to do with like the town poisons people and brings them into a sanitarium and then uses their body to ship out to medical students, right? That's kind of like the loose.
Yes, maybe it's this one is so undercooked that you can't really tell what's going. I have no idea what this movie is even about, and
Yeah,
they
this is the most bewildering one of them all.
for sure. And I believe no, because the second one also uses a narration, but like it reminds me because this is not the only sort of instance of this sort of movie where like a producer kind of cynically comes along and buys up like bits and pieces of other movies to sort of smash them together and make a movie. Like
Sure.
when I was taking notes for this, I was reminded of have you ever seen Doris Wishman's A Night to Dismember?
Oh, yes.
Oh no, I've heard of it though.
So yeah, so I watched that one just recently, and it really reminds me of this movie because it is a movie that it's really nobody knows what really happens to it. There's a whole bunch of stories, but like the original materials, much of them were destroyed, and I think all of the audio track was destroyed if it ever existed in the first place. And so it's
Okay.
just a compilation of scenes which sort of loosely tell a story, but in order to really kind of get you over the finish line, there's a narration that sort of for some reason exists. This
Well,
reminds
I
me
mean,
of
the
that where
narration exists to cover over all the weird transitions. That's also not a fully a new idea. I mean, that's a thing that people have been doing for a long time. There was a guy who I can't remember his name. He was a guy from California, probably in the I'm gonna say 50s and 60s. He would buy up a bunch of like real kind of low budget movies from Mexico, like horror and gothic horror from Mexico, and he would kind of re-edit all of them and then re-release them in the US as something totally different. This used to happen in Italy all the time, and they would essentially recut those movies to be like erotic stories, and but they would star people like Christopher Lee and shit like that.
oh
I mean,
wow.
even what's that movie Snuff, the one that
Oh yeah, the
Kurt
Rob the
made? Yeah,
with the Finleys made.
yeah, like that one is the same way. And like that was Snuff was a movie that was supposed to be something entirely different, and some guy bought it and then recut the movie. And they were like, "Hey, we had nothing to do with that movie. We did not make a weird, gross, like sex horror movie."
Yeah, yeah.
And yet their names show up on it.
Yeah, Godfrey Ho, like this is practically his
That's who I was
entire
thinking of.
MO is he'll buy movies from like the Philippines and from Taiwan, and then he'll take like 4 or 5 separate movies and just cut them up into a single movie. And you can tell like these are not the same actors from scene to scene, but like he'll shoot a sort of like interstitial wraparound thing for it, and he'll put the word
Yeah,
ninja in the title and just release
yeah,
it. And he's done it
yeah.
dozens of times. So yeah.
And sometimes the footage he's pulling is from older movies that he made as well.
Yeah, right. Because he wasn't that wasn't always his business, but yeah, like that's what I was reminded of when I was watching this. But all of these movies are, I believe, are produced by the same guy.
Yeah.
They're all written by the same guy, and the writer for these movies is a fascinating story.
Slash con.
Okay.
So yeah, here I get some notes of this. I the writer is a guy named Philip Jordan, and he has dozens and dozens of movie credits, and the vast bulk. He's also been nominated for an Academy Award 3 times, and he won once. And the thing is, he probably didn't write like any of those scripts because what was happening was in the 50s, he there was the blacklist, right? And so
Oh yeah.
there were all of these writers who were unable to get work, and so it was either leave town and go back to wherever you came from, or stay there and starve. And so what he did was he went to like all of these blacklisted writers and was like, listen, write a script, I'll put it into the system, it'll have my name on it, but you'll get half of whatever I make off of this. And so all of these blacklisted writers were able to work, but he was putting his name on everything. uh, I mean, from what I read is he stuck to his word. He never screwed anybody over. The only people he ever really wheeled and dealed with was with producers and studios. But like, yeah, most of his work was written by other people. And then after, like, there's a period after, like before that and after that also, that it's believed that his secretary wrote, like basically wrote everything. Like he would come up with an idea and she would do, he would do the broad strokes and she would basically make a movie out of it. So yeah, there's no evidence that this guy ever actually did any actual writing. He would just like come up with ideas, somebody else would do the work and he would just slap his name on it.
Which is
Well,
why I
if you
think it's a fine line between not screwing people over and legitimately doing work, because that sounds an awful lot like screwing people over.
Oh, sure, sure. Like, I mean, there's also like some story, there's like some weird story that like before he got into Hollywood, he was a lawyer, but it's believed that he hired somebody to go to law school for him and just like do all the work. So
So he's
it's
Donald Trump. He's basically Donald Trump.
yeah, yeah. So
you, you know,
he ends up he gets nominated for Dillinger, the movie with Lawrence Tierney in 1945. He gets nominated for Detective Story in 1951. He wins in 1954 for Broken Lance.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And then eventually, like some things kind of go wrong for him, and he kind of like he retires. Also, like this method really works well for him during the studio system years. But like once things sort of change in the late '60s and going into the '70s, like that method no longer really works for him. But it sounds like he became like really really wealthy doing this.
there's
And
I work in IT, and there's this whole thing about like uh, a lot of stories where people will get paid a full-time wage to be a coder, and
oh
then
yeah, I
let's
know this story. Yeah,
you know where I'm going with this, and they'll pay
yeah,
somebody in like China or India to do the work for them and just coast.
yep.
So this thing happens in every industry, I guess, to some level.
Yeah. He's just outsourcing everything. Um,
In
there
the
was,
wrong business.
oh, Jesus, I know. There's
Seriously.
another, yeah, I got a lot of information from an article that was posted on filmnoirfoundation.org about him. It's like a prestige article that's really, really interesting, but like one of the last lines in it is he had some guy go over to sort of like consult on like basically interview him, ask him how to sort of do special effects on a budget. And he was like, kid, you could do all these special effects in your bedroom. I'm going to make you $1 million, which given how the claymation in this movie looks, it definitely tracks.
So you're saying, yeah, Philip probably did all the claymation as well.
Yeah. Or he just like hired out like some like high schoolers because this stuff looks like arts and crafts level special effects. It's so crazy. It's such a
Totally.
strange movie. Also, the guy who plays the singer in the band is his son.
Do it. Yep. Called it.
But
Yeah.
but the voice is this sort of guy who's like a just sort of a voice for hire. I think he's like a touring musician. But you're
Right. So
saying the actor in the film who's dancing and kind of the face of it is his son?
yeah, it's his son. And so yeah, he has credits on other stuff that his dad produced. Like he was like sound recordist on one. So like he was basically the guy pushing record on the Nagra. And he did craft services on another, which is a credit that I thought was really funny.
Hey,
But
you got to be a part of SAG, right? You got to get those credits.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. But like, yeah, like I mean, for all intents and purposes, like his son definitely looks like a trust fund kid who was just like his dad was trying to give him some kind of direction. It's like, hey, you know how to do that break dance and stuff. Once you get in here.
The like, there's not really too much to say about the first segment. I think they get more interesting as they go. The only thing is, if you kind of just take a step back and look at what they were generally trying to do, it is a great like Twilight Zone episode because Dave, you mentioned Twilight Zone episode. I mean, the core concept of, like where do body parts come from for these medical schools? There is kind of an interesting story in there somewhere. I don't think they nailed it, but
Well, yeah,
I like what they were trying to do.
there is a recent episode of the sort of the new like Netflix Unsolved Mysteries
Okay.
that is about that very thing where like I believe it was in the 80s, there's this kid like walking through the woods like a teenager just like cutting through the forest to go home, and he finds in the middle of the woods he just finds a severed head, But like when they investigate it, they find out like that this head is like embalmed. It's gone through this whole process, and like like the investigation leads them on this weird thing where it's like this is not a murder victim. This is probably like a head from some sort of like body parts farm that's like, you go to be like, somebody says, okay, I want to be cremated, and then like, the shady funeral home is like, well, they're not going to need these body parts, so they cut them
What
off.
the hell are you talking about?
Look it up, dude. It's a fascinating story. So like, yeah, like it's a little shades of that, because what they eventually find out is like there's a whole like market for this that happens in like product demos for
Are you
like,
talking about body farms?
no. Body farms are a whole different thing. This is like a place where you can go and you can like
First of all, we need to establish that Unsolved Mysteries is not a reliable source. It's not the news, but go on.
It's a very compelling story, and their whole thing is
Mom,
like,
if you could please not refer to Weekly World News as the news.
no, yeah, like that's what I'm thinking is like it's that sort of thing where like there is a market where you can just go and buy a head or an arm if you need it.
I'm thinking of like there's Vegas trade shows that'll take over like an entire casino because they're so big, Then you
Yeah.
kind of go like off the strip and then maybe a little further away, and then you get to these trade shows that have like more realistic looking skin and like better wax to keep it looking fresh and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Also,
Um,
God is played by Ferdy Mayne, who's the bad guy in Fearless Vampire Killers. I saw that immediately. I thought that was awesome.
And the guy who plays Satan looks like a real disappointed Don Knotts impersonator. So it's kind of the same.
He's a real cross between him and Mr. Furley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, Mr. Roper. Mr. Don Knotts was Mr. Furley.
So they are deemed the people in this film are deemed okay to go to heaven
For some
because
reason.
yeah, the logic is that this is a story about Harry, even though there's all sorts of different characters in here, and the idea that Harry was the one under scrutiny, I believe, and he remained faithful or something like that, or he tried or something. I don't know.
Something like that, yeah.
doesn't
Also,
really-
Richard Mall is the bad guy in this one from Night Court.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And he's also in the third segment as an entirely different character.
Speaking of reusing things.
Yeah.
Then they cut to the dance scene again, and they're still partying. And then the devil's like, "Oh, okay, fine, but check out this one." And now,
Well, actually, first they have some real banter about whether or not rock bands could go to heaven because they never think of God, which is some real mid-'80s shit.
Right. It's like what are the Westboro Baptist Church where like everybody's going to hell because they don't give glory to God.
Right. And then God says, I can laugh and cry at the same time. That is what I listen for in their music. And I thought, what the hell am I watching?
You're right, because this is not the sort of music that's going to bring a tear to your eye,
No.
Or I mean, maybe it will, but not for the reasons God means.
Speaking of what the hell am I watching? So the next sequence
Oh,
is
this one.
okay. This is one of those ones that like I gave up pretty quickly trying to figure out the plot because I don't know that it really matters. I think this is just like a series of interesting things to watch.
I feel like they left a lot because these are scenes taken from a full feature film, and so there
Right.
is ostensibly a story to be told in here, but like they kind of like set it up and then race to the meaty stuff that in between the part where like here's this guy falling for a good time gal, and then the part where they're like sitting in on this like weird thing where they're going to let a strange insect out of a jar. Like
Yeah.
there is no transitional material between there. So I was like, are these even the same? The only reason I know it's the same movie is because it features the same cast. But
Well, actually, you say that, but then later on, a lot of those cast members have different hair. And so
Yeah,
they look completely different.
It's true.
yeah.
I was taking notes as I was going through these, and there was twice during this segment that I jumped to call it segment three. And
It's
I was like,
yeah,
oh no, they're still there. Okay, okay.
utterly bewildering. But this one, this is the first time where they're like, we're gonna give you some special effects, and oh boy, uh, this was made like in 1984, I think. This one,
Yeah,
this is the one that's Death Wish Club, and it's either
yeah,
83 or 84, and like this is the year of like Ghostbusters and Terminator, and like this is what is passing for special effects in that world.
Ray Harryhausen
You're
would be
saying this
proud.
movie does not have good special effects?
I am yes. I'm gonna commit to that, I think.
Because I just have a lot of notes that say, "What the hell is happening?" It shows up like every fourth note is, "What am I watching?"
Right, because this story is it starts out like a porno where
That's
there's
the
like
first note I have.
Yeah,
it's yeah.
My first note says, "Oh my God, is this porno?" And then a couple down it says, "Oh, I guess it kind of is porno."
Yeah, because this because the story starts out where like there's a girl at a carnival selling popcorn, and then the guy like stuffs money down her shirt, and she just
Yeah,
kind of like literally throws the popcorn in the air and like walks away with him. But
yeah.
then like
yeah.
You're like, "Hey, this movie is going to go one of two ways, and neither one of them is good."
and then maybe it's a story where she gets human trafficked. Like I'm
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
really unclear on what's happening here.
And she kind of does, except she gets human traffic to like play piano.
Right.
Yes.
Because she has dreams of being a musician, but like, oh, that's a tough hill to climb. And luckily there's this like rich guy who, sets her up, but she like plays it in like real provocative clothing.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was a little disappointed that this writer didn't get a credit on Eyes Wide Shut. Um, because very quickly and for no real apparent reason, the movie pivots into this like death club, I guess, where
Yeah.
there's a group of people that meet and do a séance with a bug,
Oh,
and
right,
then the
but first, it must be mentioned that the guy who eventually sort of like goes into this world with her, like he discovers her and becomes like obsessed with her because they were watching like a stag film at his fraternity house, and she
oh
was the
yeah,
girl in the movie.
Boy,
that's right.
that's never happened to you before.
That's not typically the way it goes now.
Yeah. Guess you're not very enlightened.
It was not he was not sexually aroused. He was in love,
He was in
and he became
love.
obsessed. Yeah.
Yeah. He was so in love that he followed her into the seamy underworld where strange deadly insects are maybe kill somebody. Who knows?
Yeah, but
I
fortunately, he's very good at kung fu.
Yeah.
that's right.
That comes in handy later
Yep.
when they trap him with a big net. People are listening to this. What the fuck are they talking about? That is
And
literally
the
what is
answer is
happening in this movie.
yes.
Yeah. Which yeah, like because a net also shows up in 1990 Bronx Warriors, and we spent a
I'm a
lot of time talking
I'm a big
about
fan
nets.
of netting people in combat. I think we should all just go back to that. No more guns. I wish we had school nettings.
Nets and spears. That's all you need. That's all you need. But
That's hilarious. They have like they build like rafters to protect the kids from being netted at random. Oh.
It'd be like Scooby Doo every day.
Yeah. Oh, it's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're gonna peel away the noise, I think the story they're trying to tell here is that there's this weird group that gets together and like they all want to die, but like so they hope that the bug like chooses them, and then they have different methods of death. Like there's where am I? What is it? There was a the bug like, gets into someone's face and like explodes the face in one of
oh,
them.
Right, because yeah, so the way that I sort of interpreted this was like because their setup is like we have all had meaningful experiences near death, and like now like they're
Uh-huh.
addicted to that thrill, so they play these
Mhm.
games of like roulette. But in that case, the insect like lands on somebody, and then they get like real nervous, and then it moves to somebody else, and then it flies out the window and just lands on some people like doing it in the park, and that's when the guy gets stung and his face like explodes on the girl.
But none of that is going to matter at all.
Does not matter.
Has no
Also
bearing.
the guy that is dressed like Jimi Hendrix in that scene,
Uh-huh.
his character's name is Prince Flubutu.
Why?
And right, it is.
Yeah,
And he's the
Okay.
one whose face explodes later.
right, and that like how they get to that point, I'm like at a certain point I checked out mentally, and I'm like I have no idea what is happening here because like eventually the, the like the good guy is sort of in the way or preventing the girl from like earning money or something like that. So like every
Yeah, from being a better sexy piano player.
I get he's such a drag, man. But like they keep putting him in these like successively more convoluted like death traps. Like
Yeah, yeah,
think I
yeah,
think one of them they get like electrocuted or something.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
when
There's
fucking Dave Chappelle as Prince gets his face blown up.
Yeah.
it's
I was
true.
going to say, this is what I hate about this movie, aside from the fact that it's absolute garbage, is there are a lot, and as far as Vinegar Syndrome goes, like I love stuff like regional horror movies. I love when people genuinely put their whole heart and soul into a movie. I don't
Yeah.
care if it's going to be absolute crap. And most of them are. I mean, people who don't know how to make movies shouldn't be making movies. That's just a rule we should all have. But I'm glad that they do because I love watching people just genuinely try and giving it their
Yes.
all. And there's something very charming about that. This movie is the opposite of that, where this is a deeply cynical movie made by someone who just grabbed a bunch of shit from like a flea market, so to speak, and just kind of cobbles together this thing to make money. And there's something so offensive to me about that. Like, meanwhile, there are people out there just trying to make you one movie, and that movie might be pieces. And it's so good because they think it's so wonderful. And
Yes.
like you just made this to make a bunch of drive-in money, or like, even worse, like movies like this, because this shit shows at like grindhouses. And look, people who go to grindhouses, it was not for the fucking movies. I guarantee you that. They were there to do all kinds of other things, but watch the movie was not one of them.
Yeah. This movie did actually get a theatrical release.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. But it wasn't like a major thing. It wasn't in any major cities. It was in Knoxville, Tennessee,
Of course it was.
which was probably a condition of the distributor because this is a movie that strikes me as like early direct to video. Like they saw an opportunity to get something on video store shelves, but like whatever the distributor was like it's got to run it needs to run theatrically first, and like
Yeah,
that was
so the Academy would consider them for award season. Yeah.
right. Uh, but yeah, there is definitely this is definitely a deeply deeply cynical movie where they were like, well, we've got all this crap that we're not using, like we may as well sort of like try to get something out of it.
I think that's why I couldn't get on board with it. I was just like, because I love dumb shit and I really love regional horror. And the reason I love it is because it's so enthusiastically
Yeah.
genuine. And
Yeah.
I can just get behind that. Like I can sit there and watch the dumbest fucking shot on video garbage because the people making it really love what they're doing. It's like Rob Zombie's movies. I think Rob Zombie is a totally fine director. I think his movies are absolutely terrible. And yet I will continue to sing his praises because that man loves to make movies for other people. This is
Yes.
someone who loves to make money. And there's something about that I just find like deeply offensive even now, 500 years later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can get on board. I can get on board with that because this is definitely not a like a Night Beast which is like an
Yeah, but I
equally
mean,
as
like, I love that.
equally as terrible movie, but like it was made by a person who was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna make movies in Delaware. And like he went and put his all into it, and he made a terrible movie that because of the energy that he put into it is extremely enjoyable.
Yeah, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That guy thought he was going to solve the crime
Yeah.
and make a great movie at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
He
but
did
this one
neither of those things, but
but
it's
I,
fine.
I'm obviously I picked this movie for this podcast. I am not fully on board with that because like I do see something in this, and it's mostly just that I am extremely confused in a way that I find a little delightful.
Well, the next, so the and I think this is just like it's almost like watching a surrealist film or something where it's like it's more it becomes almost more about the individual moments. Like there's a scene in the second segment, then we can jump into the final one, which I guess is the most makes the most sense, I guess.
It's
But
definitely it's the longest of the three, which makes
yeah,
it was like the one with the most coherent plot.
yeah, exactly. But the favorite little moment in the second one is when there's a death ball for no reason swinging above them, and like it's
Oh
just
God, I forgot about that scene. Yes.
And they're all
yeah,
in
and
sleeping bags for some reason, which to me feels like a little bit like a hat on a hat kind of thing. You're already there to be crushed by a ball. Why are you in a sleeping bag?
Gotta be ABC, always be comfy.
It's true. As David Mamet once said, always be comfy. I can go
uh,
high and lowbrow at the same time,
Well, you are the classier of the two of us.
apparently.
Scientifically proven.
that's hilarious. And then they cut back, and I think it's deemed that Greta in this case it is okay to go to heaven because again it doesn't really matter, but there was a reason given.
I
Um,
like again, like I'm mostly baffled by the fact that none of these segments have satisfying endings. Like they just kind of like come to a conclusion, and then God is like, I'll let him pass. I'll give him a pass. It's good. And the
yeah,
devil's like, curses. Well, what about this? And brings out the next one.
exactly.
This is how
So
I
then
feel
they
like Dan Curtis made stuff like when he was making like Dark Shadows and stuff. And the writers would probably be like, hey Dan, I have a question about, and he would stop them and be like, it doesn't matter, keep writing.
or in this case hire somebody to write for you.
Exactly.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, Philip
so
Jordan's put upon secretary. He was like, I need a horror movie by this evening.
here's a loose idea, make it happen.
Yeah.
She just
Um,
looked around her office and was like, what if it was about a demonic hole punch? And pencils
I'm
sharpened.
sure there's I'm sure there's at least one Amityville movie about a hole punch.
Oh, there's 47 of them, so there's got to be.
Right.
Then they cut into the Hitler one. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's titled something about Claire, I think. Um,
Oh yeah, each segment is the case of blah blah blah, whatever the main character is. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. I think this one is the case of Claire. And she marries a guy that is he looks like a televangelist, but he preaches that God is dead. He's like a Nietzsche televangelist, I
Right,
guess.
right. Once again,
Like,
Richard Mole once again making his second appearance as an entirely different character in this movie.
and this is actually not that far afield from what is actually happening at the time, because this is what was the because that's God is dead is an actual headline from,
Right.
I think it was, what is it, Newsweek or Time? It might have been Time in, I think, 78, 79. This is around the whenever this particular actual movie was made. People were really kind of or Americans generally were having this kind of existential crisis about like why are rates of Christianity or religiosity, but really Christianity, declining in America. And it was this kind of existential crisis over, is God dead? Which
Yeah.
is probably what the original movie was trying to speak to. And then it just gets swept up into this fucking bonkers Nazi kind of Phantom of the Paradise narrative.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
he's the devil.
I guess.
This one has one of my favorite things in movies, which is randomly placed portals to hell.
Yeah, yeah. A couple that just sort of spontaneously pop open. This one
Yeah,
definitely has some of my favorite effects in the entire movie.
sure.
Where there's a demon that picks up I believe it's claymation Bull Shannon.
Hmm.
But he looks like he was made by like somebody's 8-year-old.
It looks like I made it earlier today.
Just real quick for the show. Um, yeah, well, you never really know where the portals to hell are, so it's always a good thing to realize that it's random, I think. It's just a good PSA in general, right?
Just watch out, you never know.
Yeah. Um, and the general plot here is that um, there's a guy who was like part of the Nazi party, but
Mhm.
he hasn't aged a day in 35 years, and he's linked to a murder, and then the somebody's trying to prove that he's the murderer and the same guy that was a Nazi, and the police are like, well, that's impossible because it's 35 years ago.
You're right, because because the setup is there is a Holocaust survivor who sees him, I think just either in a photo or just like out and about. And the and
Yeah.
the, the guy playing this war criminal, he has a look about him. He looks like the singer from My Chemical Romance.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is the general setup. Is he goes to the cops and the cops are like, look, it can't possibly be this guy in the photo that you're showing me because this guy that I just saw looks exactly the same and that's impossible. But of course, at a certain point, he's like seducing a woman and he takes off his sock and he gets cloven hooves for feet.
Which was
It's
the best moment of the entire movie. I was
yeah.
so happy about that. I was so pleased.
Oh
Also, there
God,
was nobody. We haven't even mentioned that the detective is played by Cameron Mitchell, who
that's right.
I think by this point just like must have owed everybody money because Cameron Mitchell showed up in the worst shit by this point. Like garbage movies. There's a TV movie he made around this time where he plays a cop who gets raped by a bunch of thugs in a sewer.
Oh my
And this is
God.
a television film.
They must have been paying him in Night Train or something. Like
Oh,
it's
sheer wine.
hey, you leave that stuff alone. The oh, it's yeah. However, of the three segments, like this is the one that I actually enjoy the most
Yeah, because it's
because
the most coherent, and that is saying very not much.
yeah,
And not to be this guy, but the funniest thing to me about these three segments is that other than the fact that the God and Satan are arguing over people's souls, there's nothing thematically or tonal or there's nothing that connects these three like on any level. Like it to your point from a minute ago, this is really just like trash they had laying around the floor that they kind of like, okay, we need to make a movie in 2 weeks. Like, what can we do with this random collection of footage we have?
Yeah,
yeah,
he
yeah.
bought, he bought this at an estate sale. They were like, "Well, you get the whole lot of three films." He's like, "Great, I can make a fucking feature movie out of that."
Right. I kept trying to figure out what the connective tissue between the three of them are because they're not linked thematically at all. None of these segments have anything to do with each other. And even the
No.
sort of wraparound story, which is sort of attempting to connect them, is not really pulling it off either. But like ultimately, end of the day, what ends up happening is all three of these movies were produced by the same guy, and I believe Philip Jordan had a writing credit on each one,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I
which could
bet if
mean
you
anything.
dug deep enough, you would find that the rights to all three of these movies probably defaulted to someone in a bankruptcy settlement, and
Probably.
they then purchased those, yeah, at an estate sale or something like that.
Yeah.
And a very unattended auction. Um, yeah. It, so we've been kind of shitting on the film and laughing at it a little bit, but I'm happy to see it. I had not seen it before I watched it for this. So I was happy to see it. I mean, I did have a smile on my face while I was watching it. It's not, it's short, right? The whole thing is, let's see, the whole thing is 93 minutes. So it's not
Yeah.
like it tortures you on time.
No, I that's the thing is like I the very first time I watched this, I was like, "What is this?" I think I might have even fallen asleep, but I've since watched it a couple of times, and I find it mesmerizing in its audacity. Like it is a movie that thinks you're an idiot and that you'll watch anything. But
Well, we did just all three of us sit through the entire film to talk about it for 2 hours,
I
so
yeah,
guess they're
I
not
think he
wrong.
wins.
but the way that everything is just sort of haphazardly chopped up and thrown together into a single movie, and they give it this exceedingly silly wraparound.
Right.
There is something to it that I find incredibly charming. Despite the fact that it is just bald-faced, like naked cynicism. It is a cash grab. It is a movie made by people who think that people are just snatching up anything at the video store. They weren't necessarily wrong, but there's whatever it is that Vinegar Syndrome saw in it when they decided to release it. Like I also saw that quality, which is sort of a through line that runs through like a lot of their weird or more regional releases. This isn't quite up there with some of my favorites, but there is a charm to it. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, what is this movie they're talking about? It's on Tubi. I believe it's out of print through Vinegar Syndrome right now, but like you can watch it on Tubi for like
Actually, don't listen to him and don't watch this movie.
don't listen to him and watch this movie.
Uh,
Listen to
I'll
me.
tell you. I'll tell you what it is. As I watched this, I remember John Waters once was said a thing about how he wishes that they would do this in film school more often, where they would just give kids like the newspaper for the day and say, go out and make a movie about something you found right here. That is what this feels like to me. It's like someone just dumped a bunch of shit in front of an editing student and was like, make a movie out of this. And they did their absolute best to make a movie out of this, but they still failed. This movie is terrible.
Well, yeah, it ends on a on a huge question mark. I mean, it definitely ends. That's for sure. I mean, the ultimate ending of it, like once we get past, I mean, the story, the final third of the story is ultimately uh these like a cop who eventually kind of comes around to the idea that this guy is either the devil or like a demon or something,
Yeah.
and he's got to find a way to trap him. There's something about a box made from the wood of the true cross that like if they get his
Right.
heart,
Right.
they
I
get his
missed that
heart
part altogether.
yeah, like if they get his heart in the box, then like it'll destroy him. But then like he bamboozles the people trying to like get his heart at the end, and then they're like, and then the devil. We flash back to the train, and the devil's like, well, what about this? And God is like, he poo poos the whole thing and is like, they're all going to heaven, even the devil. I'm joking about that last part, but like, and then but it does just suddenly like end, and then they're like, okay, well, just about time for this here train to crash. Peace out. And then the train does crash.
And then but it does. Then it takes off to heaven, just like the end of
Yeah.
Greece, and the whole band is saved.
Exactly.
Yep.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. It's determined that they're at least having a good time, and God's okay. That's enough, right?
Right. They're just celebrating the beauty of the world, man, with a song
Yeah.
called Everybody But You.
Which you may have heard throughout the entire fucking movie.
Over and over and over again.
My favorite thing was in the credits when they scrolled down and they showed like the music part. It was just the one song.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't even make it that far. As soon as this thing was done, I was like, Jesus, thank God, and turned it off.
What is it like? Cursing me under your breath or
I
out
threw my
loud?
remote at the TV, broke it.
Oh man, there are some good horror anthologies, right? Like Tales from the Crypt is the probably the most famous or one of the famous ones. Creep
Oh yeah.
Show is a good one.
Creep
Like
Show.
there's a
I
yeah.
I
What are
even
some
I
good
I
ones?
even think the Twilight Zone movie is pretty good. Well, with one exception, but
Oh, you mean the
uh,
one where he killed
we're,
everybody?
yeah, where oh shit, what is his name? John
Um,
Landis. John
Yep.
Landis
John Landis.
killed a bunch of people,
Remember that
robbed the
time
world,
John Landis killed all those people?
a couple of children, and robbed the world of Vic Morrow.
Well, I mean, come on.
Uh, yeah, like I mean, going back to that creature double feature, show that I was talking about earlier, like one of the movies that really always stuck with me was an Amicus and an anthology called The Monster Club that's got
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah, it's got Vincent Price in it, and
Peter Cushing's in it too. I think
no, maybe he is.
he's in it. It's
Uh,
got a killer soundtrack.
it's got a great soundtrack. There's a bunch of like musical performances throughout it. The three
It's a
stories are
terrible
really good.
movie, but it's a fun movie.
Oh yeah, but the one about the Lowville ghouls scared the crap out of me when I was a little kid, and it stuck with me forever. That one I recommend. Also, I believe that one's also on Tubi. So yeah,
Yes.
go ahead and watch that one.
Now, here's the thing about like what you had asked this question, Chris, when we started. One of the things that motivate, I mean, I when he asked me if I wanted to do a podcast, I work in podcasting, and to be like, I was like, well, as long as I don't have to do much, because I spend a lot of time on podcasting as it is. And the more I got into it, the more I was like, well, I realized that a lot of this stuff has, as much as it is kind of lowbrow, stuff like this, it doesn't have a lot of cultural value, but it does to some people. And these
Sure.
movies meant a lot to me growing up. A lot of these like real kind of trashy stuff. Like I'm a huge fan of AIP movies. I mean,
Yeah.
Vincent Price is sort of my hero. And these movies, they mean something to somebody. And I think that's enough of a reason to talk about them. We love them because they mean something to us. Even if they're trash, even if the people who made them would look at them and be like, "Eesh, my God, I forgot about that one." To somebody, they matter. All culture matters,
Yeah.
except this type of stuff where it's like, this is truly ephemeral garbage. Like, this is
Mm.
stuff that someone made to make a quick buck and to sort of crank it out and throw it away. And I feel like that's why when I watch it, I'm just like, my God, why did you bother with this? Like, you maybe made some money, but ugh, everything that had to go into it. Like, every now and then I'm sort of proven wrong in my all culture matters thing when I see stuff like this, and it's like, oh my God, why'd you do it?
um, yeah, I'm really sort of fascinated by uh the kind of vinegar syndrome uh process. Like how did they come to this, and what made them think like we should restore this and release this in like a really prestige package? Because
Well, have
like
you
this was
seen their box set though that they put out for their 10th anniversary?
no.
It is 10, like when I say deep cut, it is the definition of deep cut. It's 10 films that are shit you have never heard of, will never hear of, and have absolutely never seen. Most of it's not very good. Some of them are mind-bogglingly insane.
Oh yeah, that's the stuff was like that's what I kind of go to them for is like
Yeah.
when most of the time I feel like I feel like about 3/4 of their releases is stuff that I could absolutely do without. But there is like a sliver of their releases that when I watch it, I'm like, what is this? This is
Yeah.
amazing. Like
Yeah.
I have Dave to thank for turning me on to Ruben Galindo, but like without their releases of his movies and also the rest of the Galindo family movies, like that stuff is solid gold.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like this,
that new one is
yeah.
great.
Oh yeah, Hell's Trap is amazing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Night Train to Terror, maybe not so much. But it's one of those sort of baffling titles. It's like when I brought Elves to our show to Dave and I made him watch Elves, and that movie that episode of our pod is like 90 minutes of us just losing our minds.
You can listen to me laugh hysterically for at least a solid minute and a half in that episode.
There is a point where
Uncontrollably.
we just kind of lose control, like and it just sanity drifts away. So yeah, this movie is in that vein. Like we've got a couple of those episodes where we just kind of like are completely confused the entire time. Like that, our Blood Rage episode is very similar. And like we would, if we were to do this one on our show, it would have a very similar approach where we are just crazy by the end of it.
I there's something about vinegar syndrome I just want to touch on quickly since we went there. You know, I think there is something to be said for watching bad movies as part of like learning about film history,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think there's anything wrong with watching a movie that you just don't like for whatever reason, right? Because if you're just watching, like it's so easy to go on Letterboxd now and find a list of like you know, all the Jolly movies that are, the top rated ones or like whatever. And if you just go there and you watch those, then you're certainly have seen some great movies, which is awesome. But I don't think you have the same level of appreciation as if you go through one of those Mill Creek box sets with 100 Jolly movies, and most of them are garbage, and you find like six that are just, change your world,
Oh
right?
yeah, there was what is it, Arrow put it was Arrow that puts out those Forgotten Jello
No, that's
boxes.
Vinegar Syndrome.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like they released one that recently that is, or actually no, I think it was in the last couple of years, but it is objectively a bad Jello. It's called Sister of Ursula,
Yep.
but there are qualities to that movie that are unlike any other Jello I've ever seen. And it
Yeah.
is equal parts like fascinating and really upsetting. But it's not a good Jello, but it's a weird one, and it is totally worth watching just because there's nothing like it. Which is kind of like brings me back around to this one. Like there is not really anything out there like this movie. And I kind of think that like if you have a tolerance for trash, at the very least, you will never see another movie like this one. It's got that going for it.
I mean, also like I watching bad movies, especially when they're like objectively bad, you know, I know why The Seventh Seal is such a brilliant movie because I've seen so much other garbage.
Exactly.
I can
Yeah.
look at really brilliant film and know why it's good because I've watched people fuck it up so many times.
Yeah.
And there's a
Cogent,
lot to be said for that.
I
that's a
think so, really.
cogent point.
No, I really believe that. There's the whole argument, even if you want to pull it away from filmmaking, of like you can't understand lightness without dark, right? I mean, I don't want to go too far off on this, but there's something at the core of like discovering a topic deeply where you have to really understand the breadth of it. So that's why I don't like it's 90 minutes of my life. Like I'm fine, Like I was really happy to see this. I'll be happy to talk about it when it comes up, and I like being in the conversation. So anytime, laughing about the theme song or like whatever. I like all that stuff kind of matters to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and without that journey, I would have never seen the telephone book, which I just saw a few months back, and it absolutely blew my mind. Like, y'all know what I'm talking about? It's like a VS release number 7 or something.
I don't think I know this one.
Holy cow. Just please, like, just okay. So the story goes the comedian, there's an SNL writer who was with, um, oh shoot, what's his name? The guy who killed himself because of a drug overdose.
Oh, Belushi.
Sorry, Belushi. Thank you. There's a guy who was with him that night, and that's kind of his claim to fame, which is unfortunate because he was a highly gifted writer, and he directed a movie called Telephone Book. And first of all, visually, it looks like something from like the height of Italian surrealism. It's just a beautiful looking movie. But it's the whole premise of the film is that there's a guy cold calling women from the phone book and trying to have like phone sex with them. And he happens upon somebody who shares his kink. And she's so obsessed with this guy's voice that she tries to track him down. And it ends with a animated sequence that's X-rated for like the final 5 minutes. But the whole movie is
What?
just, oh yeah, it's even better than I'm describing it. It's just, that's the whole reason I'm doing this, right? Like I want to get on with y'all and talk to Night Train to Terror because it could be another telephone book. Or I remember when I first saw Female Prisoner 701, I was just
Oh
like,
yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, we were
You,
just talking about that.
yeah. I
go
can't
ahead.
put those movies. I have a really like what is her name? The woman who plays
Oh,
Michael Kaji.
Meiko Kaji.
Yeah, I am a huge fan. Lady Snowblood, mind-blowing film.
Sure.
And I mean, the other movies she was in. What's the girl biker gang movies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was
Camp
like
Rock.
5 of them.
Yeah,
It was
Straight Camp Rock is the series.
yeah, there you go.
And she's so incredible in those. And I tried to watch these Scorpion ones, and I was like, it's the sexual violence that I have a hard time watching that. Um, but she's so incredible. But yeah, I think to your point, a lot of it is sort of like I can't understand who I am until I know who I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's that like, I can't understand what I'm really into until I know what I'm not into. Like, a long time ago when I was in grad school, I took a job at a museum, it was a historic house museum. And I was like, I'm going to be a historian and I'm going to work in a museum. It took about 4 days before I was like, Jesus Christ, I am not going to work in a historic house museum. That is damn sure. And yet that experience was still super valuable because I
Yep.
knew after that I don't want to be in this environment. I don't want to work under these conditions and with these kinds of people. And that's what drives us to shit like Vinegar Syndrome. And we're like, I know that a lot of what is coming out of big studios, and I think this is maybe true now more than ever, at least for me, it's like I watch new movies and I think this does nothing for me. Because I
Right.
know who I am, and I know that it's with like the genre film archive, that it's Vinegar Syndrome. It's like that is where I want to be, and that is where these are the movies I love. I wouldn't have known that if I had not been so turned off by trying other stuff.
I feel, and that's actually kind of the best place to, I think that might be a great place to end it because we can just say Night Train to Terror is a movie to watch to understand who you are in the world.
Absolutely.
Who knew?
Y'all, wow, thank you. I already knew about the way that y'all interacted with each other. I was so glad to be able to do this with y'all here. Where do you want to direct people? You said Spotify. Is there any other things that you're working on you want to point people to engage with Bring Me the Axe or what is it, 99 Cent Rental?
Yeah. So we kind of galvanize everything under our Instagram profile. That's Bring Me the X Pod on Instagram. That's kind of our main point of contact, and we've got we got some of the best, like just most engaged listeners over there. Like if you end up over there, you follow us. Like we go back and forth. We play games. We have a thing we do weekly. Uh, where we kind of like put out hey, if you got to do a double feature against this movie this week, we're doing Grizzly, like what would you make the pairing with?
Oh,
And that
cool. Okay.
that a lot of people have a lot of fun with that. You get a sort of no prize for winning. We usually sort of single out like one kind of outstanding pick, the one that we think is the best. And week to week people seem to really enjoy that. So yeah, Bring Me the X Pod on Instagram. Dave's got one of his own. It's mostly the same stuff, but it's also worth following as he's that queer wolf. New episodes get announced over there, and we have a lot of fun over that way with our listeners.
Well, y'all are a lot of fun, and I think that came through today. Thank you so much for recommending this film, and really appreciate y'all coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week, and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror. We'll cover all the subgenres, so join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.